and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, if you remember yesterday, this program, the discussion that was going on was primarily about the bedlam in the parliament. The way, the kind of scenes we saw in the parliament, the kind of aggression, anger and exchange of blows we saw in the parliament. Today was a rather better day. Today things started settling down and we saw that both the treasury benches and opposition actually went through some kind of rapprochement, and that's why after three failed attempts the opposition leader actually managed to finish his speech. That is not all. Something very interesting was happening when he was delivering his speech. One felt that he was addressing more rather than addressing the content of the budget speech, he was addressing what amounts to hearsay, that this might happen, Shneed hai, that is the news is, but because it is not actually part of the budget speech, you can assume many things, but hardly that kind of homework was visible. I don't know what might be the cause. Some of these political parties that are now part of the opposition benches are very, very good researchers, well informed. When opposition leader was speaking, Khurram Dastagir Khan was sitting next to him. He is one of those readers and politicians who actually reads, voracious reader. Similarly, when it comes to People's Party, it has Shari Rahman Sahiba, and she has been flagging the issues which she thought are important in the budget speech, but that we didn't see today. But regardless, at least now we can say with confidence that there was some kind of consolation that now the parliamentarians are behaving the way they are supposed to. Today we are going to talk about budget session as well, but we are also going to tell you what are the major or key points that we are going to address. One is electoral reforms, because it is important. Prime Minister Imran Khan has directed for early completion of electoral reforms. This is important. Prime Minister Imran Khan has directed for early completion of electoral reforms. Then government is committed in fulfilling all constitutional requirements to ensuring transparency in the general elections in the country. This was said by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan. Use of electronic voting machines is the only option to prevent rigging and ensure transparency in the election process. Prime Minister Imran Khan. I thought that these quotes will give you some idea where we are headed. Now, before we actually start the discussion and I introduce the panelists, our team has prepared a package for you. Let us watch that first, and then we are going to introduce the panel and discussion.
Electronic voting is a mechanism that uses electronic means to either aid or take care of casting and counting votes. Depending on the particular implementation, e-voting may use standalone electronic voting machines, also called as EVM, or computers connected to the internet. According to the data available, around 34 countries in the world are using electronic voting machines on different levels. Only 4 countries are using the EDS nationwide. Our eastern neighbor India has been using e-voting nationwide since 2001. Using a novel identification strategy, intra and interstate variation of state assembly elections results from 1976 to 2007 and post-poll survey data. The study provides strong evidence that the introduction of EVMs led to a significant decline in the electoral fraud, strengthening the weaker and vulnerable sections of the society, and a more competitive electoral process. Potential technical problems or issues include power outage or malfunctions in internet connectivity, as well as the possibility of server shutting down or crashing. The reliable recording and storage of votes is also an important consideration.
Right. Although we are going to talk about electoral reforms and a big issue, and that is electronic voting machines, let me remind you that this program is called Politics Today. It is not called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Repair or Maintenance. So we are not merely going to focus on the machines. We are going to talk about politics of electoral reforms as well. Apparently machines keep on failing us as well. But let me introduce the participants in the program. In the studio, I have Javed Jadoon Saab, who is a journalist of renown, an analyst, political analyst. Thank you very much, Javed Jadoon Saab. And remember, I was talking about how machines keep on failing us. Our second guest was to join us on Skype, but there seems to be some problem with Skype, so he joins us on telephone. Sarwar Bari Saab, a senior expert on actually electoral reforms and electoral procedural matters, joins us on telephone. Sarwar Bari Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And let me start with Javed Jadoon Saab. Javed Jadoon Saab, we have been talking about electoral reforms for quite some time. Now there seems to be a push for EVMs. Do you think that at this moment government's position is more understandable, or is it basically opposition skepticism? I remember that PMLN was also trying to launch a pilot project when it was in government. Today they think that everything is fishy. What is going on?
Thank you very much, Farrukh. I personally believe that use of technology is imperative as far as the transparency in the electoral process is concerned. Why? Because there have been so many question marks as far as the current or the prevailing system of elections we have right now. There have been allegations of rigging from almost every political party in almost every election till 2018. So why not go for the electronic voting machines? Opposition and the government, the two sides can sit together. They can talk about, because both parties definitely have the technical experts as well. And if they don't have available within their ranks, they can hire the technical experts, and they can ask their opinion that how possible you can make them foolproof, maybe not 100%, but maybe 80%, 90%, because technology cannot be ruled out in today's electoral, as far as elections are concerned.
Right. I like the word foolproof. I say this because a lot of criticism of electoral politics is basically within the domain of speculation, not reality or evidence, right? We have been seeing commentators telling us that the elections are getting transparent. At that time, politicians actually refused to believe that. And at this moment, it seems that no matter what you do, politicians find a way to question the outcome of elections, especially those who lose. Who needs reforms? Electoral politics or political parties and their mindset?
I think to start with, it is the political parties which have to reform themselves before you go for the electoral process reforms. Why? Because you have to have democracy, first of all, within the political parties. And then you can talk about holistically about democracy in the country. Secondly, Farrukh, you had a very interesting point that why Pakistan Muslim League N, which was advocating reforms in electoral process, and they were talking about introducing modern technology as well, and why now they have started sort of opposing it. I think the only reason is for me, it looks opposition for the sake of opposition, nothing else.
Right. When it comes to technology in third world countries, it is like a military academy. Bits of it keep passing out. But let me bring in Sarwar Bari Saab. Sarwar Bari Saab, the last time you were in this program, we were talking about the need on, futility of EVMs. But let us talk about the broader aspects of electoral reforms. One, how much engaged are you with this process? Secondly, what are the areas, even apart from EVMs, that need reform in the electoral process right now?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's very important to ask one question, that why, despite having so much use of technology in so many fields, particularly after the pandemic outbreak, but still we see that only a tiny number of countries have been using electronic voting machines. I think that's very important. That does not mean that I would oppose the EVM. I think it's very important that the EVM or a better technology must be used. But I think the important aspect of any election is free and fair, and then a transparent form of elections. Now, EVM, I think, in number of ways, does not provide transparency. We need to have a ballot paper which is traceable and auditable. The electronic machine which is being used in India does not produce any traceable or auditable ballot paper. And the machine which is being developed by ComSets or Ministry of Technology also lacks that. But I think I have been told once that the machine which is being developed by Pakistan will produce a ballot paper, a paper ballot paper. Now, I think, in my view, as far as my knowledge is concerned, the voter will not be able to see what has happened on the ballot paper. So if that transparency can be guaranteed, then of course one can support the EVM. But having said that, I think also you mentioned that what other electoral reforms we required. Of course, we need procedural reforms. We also need social reforms, because elections are primarily a social phenomenon. It's not technological phenomenon. So since it is a sociological phenomenon, and it has its own political implications, therefore we need to understand that there are a number of issues which we need to improve. One, that our parliament or provincial assemblies are completely now taken over by a few dynasties. If you look at our parliament, which consists of about 400 plus members, but if you do some analysis of the families who have occupied most of the seats, I have done some calculation, they come to 204 or 210, not more than that. Right. So I think the electoral reforms must also address the monopoly, because monopoly is also being addressed in our economic arena. So that, and also Article 38 of Pakistan's constitution says that the means of production and wealth must not be concentrated in few hands. So similarly, politics and our legislative business should not be monopolized by a few families.
Right. Sardar Dari Sahab, you are addressing the overall, kinks in the system in the entire society. The question is it not because of this dynastic politics? Is it not because of the fact that political parties are not viable organisms or organizations in this country, that because of their financial problems, most have to actually critically depend on dynasties or influentials? If they had their strong treasury, they perhaps could go for any kind of candidate.
Well, I think this was not the case in the 70s. After the 1970 elections, we know very well that the dynasties did not have the control in the legislative assemblies of Pakistan. There were trade union leaders in our assemblies, and Kisan movement leaders like Sheikh Rashid, Miraj Muhammad Khan, Rana Mukhtar, and I can name so many other people who were elected. Mr. Jinnah, our founding father, was president of All India Postal Union Association. He was elected at the time in 1925, and the total strength of the postal services were 70,000. So he was proud of having a member of a trade union. But now we see that instead of spreading political power along over their own members, they are concentrating political power in few hands. Like if you look at the Bari family, if you look at Qurayshis, if you look at Bazaris or even Sharifs, you would find that each family on average have 5 to 7 members in the assembly. So this is a joke with Pakistan.
Absolutely, sir. We are going to talk about that further in the program, but I recall that at least in the history books that there were Tiwanas and Dultanas since the very inception of Pakistan, and they kept on dominating the politics of the country, or at least the provinces they were in. My concern at this moment, one, EVMs. How to ensure that if you are going to use a machine, everyone actually believes in the outcome, right? We used RTS. That Jadoon Saab was disputed. We keep on going for procedural clarity, and somehow people actually end up questioning that as well. And finally, while we are worried about dynasties and nepotism in politics, why is it that we are not focusing on campaign finance laws? Because that could have fixed so many problems and ensured that a blue-collar man could also end up in the parliament.
Farrukh, there are two different dimensions. One is the introduction of modern technology in general elections. I see a serious problem when we outrightly reject introduction of technology. I'm not talking about EVMs. I'm talking about introduction of modern technology. If we can have machine-readable passports without any hiccups, we can have machine-readable national ID cards, no issues at all. In fact, it has really streamlined the whole process. The banking system is related with it, connected. Machine-readable passports have literally improved Pakistan's image abroad as well. And thirdly, in 21st century, if we totally reject introduction of technology, like it was said that EVMs may be not reliable, then I think we should be able to give the alternative then what is reliable. But when we reject, then we must have something alternative, because the current system has been rejected by almost every major and minor political party in Pakistan.
This is something that is common in the country. It is part of the political culture. What he is saying, and what I could discern, is essentially that even if you want to have an EVM, please ensure that it is a hybrid system where there is a paper trail. And we have seen in the US and elsewhere that where machines are used, that people end up actually questioning the outcome. Dominion scandal, so-called Dominion scandal, has become quite big.
I totally agree with you, Farrukh, but the problem with the opposition is they have outrightly rejected the EVMs. They have not even sort of accepted the offer of the government to sit with some members of the government, and they can discuss whether, if you have a problem with that, maybe you can suggest the alternative system. If the machines made in Pakistan are not trustworthy, then you can maybe propose something else.
That's a good question, by the way.
But I think that the issue with the opposition is they have rejected and they haven't given any alternative system. If you reject the current system, you believe that the elections are stolen, elections are rigged, and elections are, I mean, every political party. In 2013, we know that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf rejected the elections, saying that the elections were rigged. In 2018, People's Party and Muslim League M rejected the elections, saying that, claiming or alleging that elections were stolen and rigged. Then I think the problem is you have to have a converging point. Maybe the old system or the new system. Maybe you can introduce certain parts of the technology, and maybe you can sort of retain some portions of the current system as well.
And but that will happen when opposition engages with the government, or government engages with the opposition.
The government, I think, has been offering the opposition to sit.
Yeah, not the government. Speaker National Assembly has been offering.
I think he is the right person because he is the custodian of the parliament. Maybe you can definitely involve the Election Commission of Pakistan.
Yeah.
And second point, Farrukh, when you talk about dynasties and you talk about eliminating the role of dynasties, it is not possible in parliamentary form of government because dynasties have to be rejected by the people, by the voters. You can't have a controlled democracy in any given society or country. You can't really sort of ban them because they belong to one particular family or the other particular family.
Right.
Maybe you can have a system where people are they are so much aware that they reject the dynastic politics. Even in India, I think we know that dynastic politics, we know Bangladesh, we know Sri Lanka and many other countries.
Right. Bari Sahab, if you want to come in on the alternatives to EVMs, please do. And then you can also talk about campaign finance laws, because it seems that, at least seems to me, that democracy is not something congealed. It is like water which finds its way, and in order to ensure that it finds its way, whatever measures are possible, one should be introducing them. But Bari Sahab, first alternative to EVMs and then campaign finance laws.
Well, one is that, of course, we can introduce a hybrid machine which can also produce a ballot paper so that the voter can see that whether the paper which is being produced by the machine is the exact copy and his or her intention, so that paper can be then counted by machines like scannable ballot papers, which are being used in America as well. So I'm not against the technology. That's very simple. We can find a solution. But I think still we have to ask this question: why the most modern countries are giving up on EVMs, like Germany, Holland, even India is now discussing whether we should continue with EVM or not.
No, you
But I
gave
think
three examples
as
that
far
they're conceding.
Not a single country has given up.
Transparency of elections is concerned, I think it's very important that we should talk about technology. I'm not against technology, but I think the most important aspect is that in 1947 we did not have the dynasties. Mr. Jinnah's children did not come to our Constitutional Assembly. Liaquat Ali Khan. We have
Sir, Bari Sahab, allow me to intercept here. I have to include a third guest. Dr. Zarqa Soharwardi Taimur actually joins us on Beeper. She's Senator of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Sir, I'm going to come back to you, but let me welcome first Dr. Zarqa. And Dr. Sahab, once again we are talking about EVMs and electoral reforms. At this moment, it seems that the opposition is not in a mood to work with the government, and the government keeps on pushing for EVMs. Is there a possibility of having a hybrid system?
Thank you very much, Mr. Pitafi. I think the issue is more that the opposition is not interested in doing anything which the government is saying. They don't want to have come halfway to meet the government, because the EVMs were given a trial in the last government, and all of these members of parliament who were on the committee, they visited various countries, Philippines being one where the entire process is being followed. And EVMs are a good solution, but they are not the only solution in the electoral reforms. We are looking at 49 different electoral reforms that should be considered. I mean, it also includes the issue of the overseas Pakistanis being and then the processes themselves. So a lot of the issues that give rise to controversies, the ROs and the taking things into their own hands, the EVMs would sort of remove those ambiguities and the fallacies that occur due to everything being manual. And the EVM machines we have seen, they all have a paper trail as well. You can see how many people voted, who they voted for. So the entire, and the machines are really good because they, you don't need an internet connection. They have their own batteries. You can use them in places where there is no electricity even.
Right.
So they're pretty handy, and the countries who've got the newer machines with which cater to those countries, they're very happy. If the entire process, I mean, I was hearing your discussion that India has stopped, or there are some policies in the Indian system. So I don't think that the EVMs are a part of the solution, and I think we should go towards a way which has some better alternatives, because this RO system has created so much literally hangama in every election that we see. And
Right.
then, so it's better to have...
Dr. Sabha, just a caveat that no matter which machine is being used, you'll have to have ROs or some kind of human interface present on the occasion. So that bit doesn't go away. But very quickly, before I go to the rest of the panelists again, let me ask you, if the opposition doesn't listen to the government's counsel, or doesn't actually want to work with the government on the matter, what is your plan B?
I mean, the plan B is what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
The current electoral system with it's not at all up to the mark. There are so many issues every year. Every time the elections are held, there's a lot of hullabaloo over, whoever loses says it was not a fair election. So really, there's a very, and I heard you were talking about dynastic politics and the kind of attitude that exists in politics today in Pakistan. It's not an attitude where people want to work for the country. It has become a culture where whoever is in parliament thinks that it's their time to make money and get back the money that they spend in going for the election, and then multiplying that by 4 or 5 or 10, I don't know.
Right.
It's a sad state of affairs, and it's even sadder when you think of where is this system
Dr.
going.
Dr. Sabha, with due respect, what I'm going to conclude from your remark is that the plan A is the plan B, and it is a plan C also. But allow me to come back to the studio. Dr. Sabha, I'll be obliged if you can stay with us. Let me bring back Javed Jadoon Saab. You have listened to the discussion. I mean, on one side we are looking at the procedural matters, but procedural matters are usually complicated. So we end up talking about systemic and cultural issues, right? Dynastic politics, how the old political parties don't need reform or want reform. But we have seen a consistent pattern, at least in the past 20 years, of reform. My concern is, on one side, when it comes to disclosure law, not campaign finance law, disclosure. If I complain that you are somebody who's actually contesting and you are using money more than was needed, there is no mechanism to enforce it, right? Election Commission can order you, suspend you, something like that, but where are its people to go and ascertain? Similarly, when it comes to EVMs, the actual discussion that had to take place about the procurement and, creation of these EVMs, that will never take place till the time opposition doesn't want to at least accept that EVMs are important things and they can be used.
Absolutely. I think you have two or three very important points you raised. First is about the acceptance of EVMs or any other alternative system, maybe the hybrid system. There is no problem. You can have the hybrid system. You can have a sort of the paperwork, etc., and then the digital process as well.
Right.
Like India, they have got a system where you really can't override the system once the vote cast, can't be altered, can't be changed. But I think you can improve upon that.
EVMs that store the votes actually are taken to a strong room and they're stored there.
Exactly.
But of late, India has also witnessed the events where EVMs were kidnapped or hijacked.
Of course, I mean, this is something you really can't rule out, Farrukh, because this can happen in a country like Pakistan and India, because such kind of, when you can sort of take away the whole bunch of ROs, etc., you can take away the machines as well. But the problem is not with the technology. Problem is with our attitudes towards the transparency of elections. Accepting the results of the elections, I think, is the most important problem we have right now. It's not confined to any one political party. I think every political party is suffering from this disease, that when they lose the elections, they are very bad losers. They don't accept the results. When they win the elections, elections are very transparent, fair, and when they lose them, of course, allegations of rigging and stolen elections. We have been hearing, we have been covering these elections as well for a long, long time. I think it's a deja vu. We have been there, seen it. So I think, what is the way forward? The way forward, I think they need to show maturity, the government and the opposition as well. Why? Government shouldn't go for the imposition of any particular system, because once they impose one particular system, for example, the EVMs, and opposition doesn't accept it, when the elections come in favor of one political party, maybe the sitting political party, they win the next elections in 2023. Opposition en bloc is going to reject the outcome of the elections, and then again we will have the same old problem, same bedlam which we have witnessed in the parliament and on the streets as well, the politics of agitation and the politics of dharnas and long marches, etc. Who is going to suffer at the end of the day? The people of Pakistan and the country, the state as well. So why not show flexibility as far as government is concerned and the opposition is concerned? They can have objections. Of course, they can have their own point of view about the safety of the system, maybe the working of the system, whatever new system is going to be proposed by the government. And I strongly believe even the government shouldn't be sort of very rigid towards the recommendations of the opposition. I think you need to find a middle ground. You need to converge somewhere, and ultimately when it is accepted by each and every political party, I think this will have a credibility. And
but we have seen that political parties agreed on ROPA and various other reform bills, and in the end, even they could not actually sort out the issues. RTS was an agreed upon concept, but RTS became such a big bone of contention that still remains a point of discussion whenever opposition wants to complain. Let me go back to Dr. Sarwar Bari Sahab. Dr. Saab, we can talk, Sarwar Bari Sahab, we can talk about various aspects. There are two concerns that I can see at this moment. One, that somehow the money aspect of everything is hardly discussed on our television channels. Campaign finance needs reform. We don't usually talk about it. The disclosure laws need reform and some kind of enforcement mechanism. We don't hear any discussion about that. I recall how many times you and I sat together in a program discussing during an election how the hoardings were bigger than they were allowed, or how much money was being used in an election. And then there is the issue of human interface. Machines are usually brought in to ensure that they are capital intensive, not labor intensive. Then if we are going to create a hybrid model, it will end up being both capital intensive and labor intensive. Is it going to solve the problem, sir?
Well, Pitafi Sahab, I think the problem lies with the kind of political class we have in Pakistan. if we look at the current political class of Pakistan, it consists of businessmen and feudal lords and some of their cronies. Now they have their interests in their business and in their lands. Now and we know that it's a very sad situation as far as political class is concerned, and somehow the state has been completely captured by this political class in Pakistan. So therefore the post-colonial state is no more an independent state of the bourgeoisie or the landed elite. So I think all this what we see in our parliament a couple of days back, and we keep on repeating this. And Jatoon Sahib has very rightly pointed out that we have very bad losers. I think he used a very pertinent terminology for the losers. But I think they are hardly the losers. They are the People's Party is ruling in Karachi. So the elections in Sindh were fine for the People's Party. After the 2013 elections, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz won in Punjab and in the center. So the elections were fine in Punjab and in the center, but not very acceptable to them in Sindh. Similarly, I think we see that all the forces who are saying that elections were rigged, if you really look at that, the component parties of PDM, most of the parties of the PDM in fact defeated each other. And I have done some analysis that in how many constituencies PDM parties have defeated each other. In Balochistan, more than 6 seats in the JUI defeated Pakhtunkhwa Milli Awami Party. Similarly, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Jatoon Sahib's province, we know that in 16 National Assembly constituencies, the PDM component parties defeated each other. And similar kind of a pattern we can find in Sindh as well. So I think it's the politics of losing elections. It's nothing else. We have been observing elections for a long time. But as far as the use of money is concerned, of course, our electoral politics and our politics has been completely hijacked by these dynasties. And Jatoon Sahib is reluctant to accept the downside of dynastic control of our politics. But the issue is not just that dynasties have done it, but I think there is a complete monopoly of these families. And according to a Pakistan Institute of Development Economic Study, the 31 families are controlling our stock exchange. And most of the companies are being controlled by these people, and they are also controlling our politics. They are controlling our legislative business. So I think this is a real problem. The political and economic monopolies overlapping each other. And this is a curse for Pakistan. This is a curse for Pakistan.
I understand your concerns and I can appreciate them as well. But the idea that if you dismantle or remove dynasties actually gives us impression that educated, learned philosopher kings are going to be elected if we get rid of, the dynasties. But with due respect, we end up seeing that from the society who comes to the parliament then, miseducated, mal-educated people. There is an example of Jamshed Dasti, who became a populist leader. And in the end, he actually burned himself down because he was that ill-informed. There seems to be something wrong with the whole society if we are going to talk about dynasties only.
Well, I don't agree with your observation, but I think that is true that I know Jamshed Dasti, I belong to that area, Multan and Muzaffargarh. I have been working there, I think that is a tragedy, that
Right.
if our elite is not going to allow social movements to grow, then people like Dusty will emerge. People, I don't want to name anybody else. Since you have mentioned Dusty, I can repeat his name, but I think I can repeat so many names that in
Yeah.
so many batakhors have replaced some big landlords in Multan area, in Vihari as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to name anybody, but I think if you are not going to, if this elite is not going to allow the social movement, the trade unions, the Kisan movement to flourish politically, then of course they are going to be challenged by people like Jamshed Dusty, people
Right.
like